afternoon and welcome to Afternoon Tea from Bookends. I'm Anita.
And I'm Gerald.
Today I thought we'd talk about story.
Okay, that's a good idea.
And also about plot, because they're not the same thing, are they?
No.
They're related, very closely related. And the reason I want to talk about story is because at the moment I'm working with children in schools.
Okay.
And the first question I ask, we're doing storytelling. Mm-hmm. And we have a storyteller in as well, and then we're recreating stories. First thing I ask is, what is a story?
Right.
And it's an interesting question because and I give them an example, and I tell them a list of what's happened to me so far that morning, and I say, is that a story? And they go, no, that's just a list of stuff. So then I say, so what does it need to be a story? And they'll say punctuation, or they'll say it needs more excitement, or various things. And what we've finally come down to, a story is a character in a situation with a problem which they have to overcome. That's a very simple story. And and then we identify 5 ways to get to that story.
Okay. To
tell that story. So I guess that's where the plot comes in. So the 5 ways would be one day, then, unfortunately, fortunately, and finally.
Hurrah.
So we then tell a story. I tell them an African story in this case. This week we're doing African stories. So I tell them a story which is similar. We talk about story bones and how stories from all over the world are all very similar and hang on a similar framework.
Okay.
So the frame is the same, whatever you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then we deconstruct the story we're talking about, and then we retell it in those 5 steps in their own words. So I think that's, for me, has really clarified how stories work. So what I want to talk to you about is how you develop a story from an idea. Mm-hmm. And then the plot being the delivery vehicle, how do you then tell that story?
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do we want to talk about the cakes first?
Cakes.
Let's
talk about cakes.
Cakes.
Today we have Christmas and Halloween on a plate.
And it's the 16th or 17th, 18th of October when we're recording
yeah, but we don't know when this is going out. So if we have Stollen and we have, what are those called? Fearsome Fancies or something, or...
Yes.
Yeah. Then it can go out whenever it goes out.
Whenever it goes out.
Enjoy.
Thank you. I think I might have a... Because I stole the Stollen.
Stole the Stollen. So I'm going to start with one of these.
Yes. Okay.
Orange, nice.
Your definitions with the children. It's really interesting because for me, and we're coming close to NaNoWriMo time, which happens in November, and the one time that I didn't succeed in finishing the NaNoWriMo challenge was when I didn't plan.
Right.
So for me, I have to know what's happening in the story and where it's going.
But you did succeed about 15 or 16 times.
I think 15 so far.
15 years you've been doing National Novel Writing Month every November.
I know, sad.
Yeah. It's great. That kickstarts, yeah. I think for me what NaNoWriMo did was get me into a writing habit of daily writing.
Yes.
But I couldn't bear all the counting, because you end up counting everything. You're counting calories, you're counting words, you're counting number of steps you've done in a day, and I just got fed up with counting.
Are you sure you were doing NaNoWriMo and not something decidedly weird?
Well, no, but Nano was an additional thing to have to count.
Right.
Whereas I just like to write.
Anyway, so I need to plan my stories to get a feel for where I'm going. And for me... We know some people who plan and who don't plan.
Yeah.
And we know some ardent non-planners who say it destroys the creativity. And I respectfully disagree because writing a book, a novel, is it like in 2 levels for me. There's creation of the story, which is the upper level.
Yeah.
What happened, a bit like you break down with the children. You've got a character in a situation, that sort of thing. So the upper level of the story is in my latest novel, there's a body washed up on the beach, for instance.
Right.
and it's initially they think it's suicide or an accident, but it isn't. And so how do we tell that story?
Well, first of all, what is that story?
What is
the
that
first
story?
level of creativity is then teasing out the story.
Yes.
You've got a situation, you've got a character in a situation with a problem, because they're dead on a beach. That's not the character though, is it? The character is someone else in that story. That's not a great example. But how do you then tease out the story? I would do it by just asking loads of questions, which I'm sure you do. So what if?
It seems like a huge wall
Yeah.
to write all these words, to write a novel inside a month. So basing it on my experience as a software developer, where we broke things down into smaller chunks,
Yeah.
I follow what's called the Snowflake Principle
Okay.
of looking at the overall snowflake, i.e. the story,
Yes.
from a top-down approach,
Yeah.
and then zooming closer and closer into the detail. The thing about the snowflake, a real snowflake, is that as you go deeper and deeper, there's more and more detail. It never stops, and it's all sorts of mathematical stuff goes on. So the first thing I do, which is Randy Ingermanson's Snowflake Principle, is write a single sentence
Oh, okay.
which describes that story. So, for instance, in the body on the beach, I've got a single sentence which is: a group of friends based in a coffee shop investigate an unusual death in a small seaside town.
Okay. So is that the same as the premise then?
That's not the premise. That goes before the premise.
Okay.
This is a
Right.
single sentence. The premise comes afterwards, which is a
Okay.
2-sentence premise.
Right.
A dead body is discovered washed up on a beach in Harcourt Bay. Can the group of amateur sleuths, led by Jerry Sanders, discover the truth behind the murder?
And you've left that with a question.
Yes.
So that's presumably meant to be a hook then.
Yes.
Because if you ask a question, your reader's going to want to know an answer. So yeah, that's good. Good. Well done.
So that's the premise.
Yep.
With a little more detail.
Yep.
We've got the location. We've got one of the characters.
Yeah.
And then I break it down into 5 sentences
Right.
to tell the story. So again, going a little bit closer and a little bit more detail. And I end up with 5 paragraphs which describe the story. So for instance, in this story, my first paragraph is: in a small seaside town, the body of a wine bar waitress is washed up onto the popular beach. The police assume it's either death by misadventure or suicide or accident. There's nothing to suggest a murder. A group of plucky amateur sleuths based in a local coffee shop use their local contacts and knowledge to investigate. So that's the sort of start of the first paragraph, and that's the setting up of the main meat of the story.
So just to be clear, this isn't anything like sales blurb or pitches.
No,
this is
no.
just for you, as the author, to understand your story and to give you something to hold on to when you're telling that story.
Yes, because it keeps your focus right at the top on that single sentence.
Right.
And
Yes.
and our mate Randy reckons you should spend an hour or 2 hours on the single sentence thing.
I can understand that.
Yeah, that truly gets to the nitty gritty of the story in a single sentence. And the idea is that if you're lost in scenes and characters and locations and stuff, you can, if you like, go right back to the top and say, where is this? What is this story supposed to be? Where is it going? And then come back down and read the levels you've created.
So you don't get sidetracked.
So you don't get sidetracked.
And I remember Hemingway got his whole story down to just 6 words,
Yes.
which was pretty impressive, really, because it's a good story.
Which was?
For sale. Baby shoes. Never worn.
It's infamous.
Very famous story.
Yeah. So what happens then? So at this stage, I have 5 paragraphs which are telling me the story, and has more or less the story from start to finish described.
Yeah.
What I do then is I then jump into a thing called Save the Cat.
Woohoo! I'm allergic to cats.
Meow. So very corny. So Save the Cat was created by Blake Snyder, who unfortunately is no longer with us.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he was a screenwriter.
Now that's interesting.
Is it?
Yes, because I think stories on film and in screens, they've really nailed it, how to tell a great story with a fantastic structure that we as viewers, or as... I think we all have a story brain. This is something else I talk to the children about. Because we all understand, through being human, we all understand how stories work. And we all know when a story's not got a satisfying ending, or gets a bit lost in the middle, or doesn't hook you in from the start.
You read some of my stories in.
We know in our bones how stories work, because we've always told each other stories.
Yeah.
And I think that the film industry has harnessed that notion of story bones and turned it into a kind of science, if you like, of how to hit what they call the beats.
Yes.
Of a story to actually keep the reader going, to really lead the viewer.
Yeah. I don't want to call it a system. Having a guide for telling a story doesn't make it stale. And people go to watch films and see great films, new films. I can't remember anyone saying, "Oh, that's boring because it's just 3 acts and it's a 3-act structure and it's the same as everything else," because it isn't. No. I liken it to the structure, the frame of a building.
Yes.
So the frame of the building is there, but you don't see it. It's hidden and shrouded in the nice fancy bits.
And with the children, I say to them that just like no two people in this room look alike, unless you're an identical twin, none of us look like anyone else, but we all hang on the same frame.
That's true.
We've all got the same skeleton inside, and yet we're all so different. And that's true of stories, all stories. And even the other thing I was going to say, that actually leaving the viewer, the reader, the listener, the viewer, whatever, to bring something to it and interpret, is actually another dimension to storytelling.
That's true.
And again, because we're dealing in schools with storytelling at the moment, it's the original story was told to them by an African dancer, singer, storyteller, and then we retell it.
Ah, right.
The point is that stories are told and retold, and she heard it from her grandmother, who heard it from her grandmother. And so every time a story is told and retold, every time a book is read or reread, something different is brought to it. And I think for me, that's a really important aspect of stories.
Yeah. So part 2 of this video, which will come out next week, will be the detail of plotting. Not too much detail, but just some overviews on how I create stories, how I've written and published 5 books this year, that sort of becoming an efficient author, in my opinion. And so that will be next week. Hope you can join us for that. Thank you for watching. And if you've liked this video, please give it the thumbs up. If this is the sort of stuff you like to watch, then please consider subscribing and click the notification bell, and YouTube will email you when another one of our videos is out. Thanks once again, and see you next time. Bye bye.
Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye bye.
Good afternoon and welcome to...
This isn't the NaNoWriMo novel. Lots of ums.
And of course the snowflake has a different connotation in the 21st century.
It does, snowflakes.
However...
And the first thing I do, which is Randy Ingerman, and one of the people I follow on Facebook, and there's a famous triangle. It's not Archimedes or Aristotle or somebody.
Pythagoras.
I won't put this in.
Okay.
But But
Except then I found I had triplets in a class last week. Although actually they really didn't look alike. I would never have known they were even siblings, let alone triplets.
if you've liked this video, oh no, I'm going to, and tick the little, and tick that little bell underneath. No. I hate that. So
We talk too much.
we talk too much.